I knew next to nothing about Guatemala before I arrived. I heard whispers of the beauty and charm of this Central American country from other travelers during this 14-month journey through Latin America. Mayan ruins, volcanoes, kind people, superb coffee. Without doing much research, I decided to go and see for myself. Like many tourists, I began my journey in Antigua, not to be confused with the Caribbean island of the same name. I'm referring to the Highland Colonial City and UNESCO World Heritage Site that's a convenient 45-minute drive from the airport. I arrived shortly before Holy Week and had no idea what to expect. I booked a room in a guest house and was received by Gloria, my kind hostess. Her husband Manuel and her 6-year-old granddaughter Valerie lived on the first floor, and guests lived on the second floor. In front of the staircase was Valerie's toy collection: dollhouses, stuffed animals, play sets, mostly in pink and purple. My room had 2 beds, a small closet, a nightstand, and a portable fan. The walls were painted green. The beds had dark green bedding and pink pillowcases. The shared bathroom didn't have hot water, but a simple trick was to shower during the hottest part of the day, so the cold water felt refreshing. The hallway on the second floor was open and airy, with a long wooden bench against the wall, which I used as my reading nook. As much as I love cafes, I often find them too loud to read and write, and end up right back at my accommodation where I have quieter surroundings. There were tiny skylights in the ceiling of my room. I thought this was smart design. Since the sun was so strong during the day, there was no need to turn on the light and waste electricity. I also noticed there were tiny skylights on my bedroom floor. I didn't understand their purpose until Gloria told me her husband inherited this house from his grandmother. It had only 1 floor when they moved in. The second floor was added later on and built on top of the existing skylights. A few years ago, I was traveling through Cambodia and stayed in a 5-floor hotel in a small town. Business was good, so the owner added a new floor every year. I just hoped the foundations were strong enough to support the extra weight. Gloria kept a number of potted plants on the rooftop, all neatly arranged. There was even a small lime tree. Manuel had plans to cover the roof and set up hammocks so guests can relax in the shade. I told her it was an excellent idea. She shrugged and said the project would take some time and money. I nodded in agreement. Every project, big or small, usually demands a bit of both. She provided 3 meals a day, from Monday to Friday. Saturday only had breakfast. On my first day in Antigua, Gloria made pork stew with rice and arepas for lunch. Arepas are a type of cornmeal cake popular in Latin America. Dinner was a vegetable omelet with black beans and fried plantains. Manuel was very busy the week I arrived. He volunteered at the church almost every day in preparation for the Holy Week processions. Several of his paintings decorated the guest house. Most were depictions of Jesus and scenes from the Bible. Some were studies of Antigua's architecture and volcanic landscape. The bulk of his income came from doing restorations of statues and religious icons for the church. On occasion, a wealthy family would hire him to repair or restore an antique. There was one long-term guest named Dan. He was from Devonshire, England, and taught English online. One of his students was a Saudi Arabian man who only wanted to talk about football, which was convenient since he loved football. Another student was a Brazilian woman with an American daughter-in-law. She wanted to be more fluent in English to communicate better with her. The pay was low, but he was content with the freedom of movement and the low cost of living in Guatemala. Years ago, he embarked on a trip similar to mine, visiting many of the countries I visited. He particularly liked Guatemala, so he decided to return and stay longer. He didn't like to cook, so the guest house arrangement was perfect for him. I love to cook, so I wouldn't want this type of living situation for long. Our first meal together was a toasted breakfast sandwich, a fruit salad, and coffee. He took his coffee with milk, and I took mine black. His sandwich had egg, ham, and cheese. I asked for mine to have only egg and a larger portion of fruit salad, since I don't like ham or cheese very much. Dan used to have an online Spanish teacher who lived in Antigua. Now that they lived in the same place, they would meet at a coffee shop for in-person lessons. He went to a local gym, took day trips into Guatemala City to do some shopping, and sometimes went to the movie theater with Gloria. He'd go back to England for the summer and return to Antigua in the fall, and possibly get his own apartment. Gloria was from El Salvador and grew up during the country's civil war. The sound of bombs and bullets filled her childhood. Even today in her 50s, the loud church bells of Antigua's cathedrals would fill her with a brief but potent terror. I asked what the war was about. She shrugged and replied she didn't know. Maybe power? I couldn't help but laugh at her response. I sipped my tasty Guatemalan coffee and listened as she told me about her life. In Spanish, of course. After a year of traveling through Latin America, I was proud that I could understand nearly everything she said. After the war came the gangs, but not anymore. Nowadays, El Salvador was unbelievably peaceful. The new president was young and fearless. He cracked down on organized crime like no other before him. He even made the rich families pay taxes. According to Gloria, they managed to avoid it in the past. The president ordered them to pay 10, sometimes 20 years' worth of back taxes. He used the money to pave roads, build hospitals, and arm the police. She said if a gangster went into a local business to collect a bribe, the business owner would call or message the local police, who'd show up with lightning speed to arrest the criminal. Anyone heavily tattooed was a target for police scrutiny. They'd be stopped on the street, their IDs run through a database. If the name was linked to criminal activity or gang affiliation, arrest was immediate. Some gangsters tried to conceal their tattoos, covering their arms and necks, but they'd be found out eventually. Nowadays, El Salvador was safe. The cost of living was higher than before, but salaries were also higher. Gloria had dual citizenship with Guatemala and El Salvador, but she had to save money to go on a one-week vacation in her home country because Guatemalan salaries were considerably lower in comparison. A simple meal in a typical restaurant in Guatemala would cost $5 to $8. In El Salvador, it would be $10 to $12. Gloria's husband, Manuel, was Guatemalan. As a young man, he went to El Salvador on a mission trip to provide aid after an earthquake. She worked at a children's hospital where she helped orphans, amputees, the terminally ill, or those with mental disabilities. He worked in construction and renovations at the same hospital. He stayed in El Salvador for 2 years before the church sent him back to Guatemala, leaving a pregnant Gloria. One day he called her, asking her what she wanted to do. He was an artist, which meant it was impossible for him to get work in El Salvador. So, a tearful Gloria decided to leave her family, quit her career at the hospital, and start a new life in Guatemala with the man she loved. Manuel's family was Catholic, and she was Jehovah's Witness, but they welcomed her into the family and never said a word to point out their differences. She had 2 daughters. The older one lived in Antigua, worked as a teacher, and was the mother of Valerie. I asked if she ever worried about her grandchild being surrounded by a constant flow of strangers. She replied no. The whole family was used to it and enjoyed hosting people from all over the world. Her younger daughter was completely independent, living and working in Guatemala City as a software engineer for a hospital. She had her own apartment and a car. Gloria was full of pride and admiration as she spoke, since she herself had never lived alone in her entire life. I asked if she worried about her daughter living in the big city. She replied no. Her commute was only 10 minutes by car, and she worked from home 3 days a week. Her daily life took place only in the safe neighborhoods of the city. There were certain red zones where gang activity was so high Even the police were afraid to go there. I told her it was similar in Mexico City, where I lived for 6 months. She nodded and said, "Young men from poor families get seduced by gangs, thinking they can escape the rules and constraints of their parents, without realizing there are also rules and constraints within a gang, with vicious and sometimes fatal punishments." I told a friend of mine about Gloria's anecdotes about the president of El Salvador, and received a completely different perspective. This friend was a former journalist, anthropologist, and university professor who told me Gloria's view was highly inaccurate. He sent me excerpts of articles saying President Bukele was a ruthless dictator, human rights violator, and master of propaganda. I wasn't sure how to respond because I've never been to El Salvador and knew next to nothing about the country's affairs aside from what Gloria said. The contrasting narratives left me perplexed. Who was I to believe? The journalist's evidence or the citizen's lived experience? While I understand the journalist's role in exposing breaches in ethics, I find myself empathizing deeply with Gloria. Her personal story, filled with challenges and struggles, humanizes her in a way that the journalist's reporting did not. I recently finished reading Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. The story follows a proud warrior from the Igbo tribe in colonial Nigeria who clashes with the changing world. The novel made me think of Gloria's personal anecdotes, which were a counter-narrative to the work of a respected journalist. I don't think I need to agree with either. The future of El Salvador, like that of any nation, remains unwritten. I simply offered a sympathetic ear to my kind hostess, who graciously told me her life story one afternoon. I'm glad she's living a good life today, and her native country is much safer than it was when she was a child. You never know who you'll meet in your travels. Back when I lived in Argentina, I met a former political prisoner from Iran and learned some intriguing things about his country. Find out how it all unfolded in this video.